Hello and welcome to AFP. My name is Devang. I'm joined by one usual suspect, David Goss. On today's show, we chat some clarity developing in MLS playoffs as we get closer and closer to decision day. The Vancouver Whitecaps are not dead after we wrote them off several times on this show. We talk about their chances. We talk about TFCII, which I feel like if you missed out on that game, that's bad fortune for you. We talk about, of course, the Canadian stars around the world playing. Some big news in NWSL in terms of the latest revelations regarding a report into systematic abuses of players in women's soccer. We talk USMNT. We talk European storylines, David. A jam-packed show today, but no Sean.
No, and it's interesting. Tottenham just gets eviscerated by Arsenal this weekend. And had you ever heard Sean had a wife or a kid? Did you know he had a job? What even is a job? I've never even heard that phrase before. And now all of a sudden, Sean K is unavailable for the show because of all these other quote unquote things that have come up. And listen, I'll say it for you so you don't have to. I think it's embarrassing. And I think he's scared.
It's shocking, to be frank. It's absolutely shocking. You think you know someone, you think they have the gall and the temerity to stand up and put their hand up and say, yeah, I got it wrong. I believe the last message he sent us in the group chat was boasting, David, about Spurs' chances.
I think he said, quote, I'm not even going to watch the game because I know Tottenham's going to win. I think that's what he said.
You know what I saw, though, David? I saw a petulant Harry Kane trying to injure Gabriel with classic Harry Kane antics. And if he wasn't English, just saying. Because Sean isn't here to defend his boy, I'm going to take out all the daggers. The weekend was great, is what I'm saying, David. Because, yes, North London is red. And the fact that game was so early on Saturday, that had a real pivot point.
Really set the tone.
If Arsenal loses, boy, oh boy, are we in for some sad moments. But because they won, everything is viewed with rose-colored glasses. I watched the Manchester Derby, which we'll talk about later, and just soaked it all in. It was great.
Yeah, it was a wild weekend of sports from TFC Friday night. I obviously am a Mets fan, so I had to experience my team getting swept in the biggest series we've played in 25 years. So there was that too at all times. My football team actually won a game that I watched and was entertaining. And then there was like 700 MLS games plus, as you said, European soccer. So wild weekend of sports. It is fortunate for you that you did get to set the tone early with a positivity.
And just quickly, I know it's early days, but I would say the way Arsenal are playing these days, it's been a while. It was very comforting to watch, and I say this in October and know the track record very well. But it was a fun game to view, and I know Antonio Conte's track record speaks for itself. But you watch two teams playing two very different brands of soccer, and the better team won on that day.
Would you border on the word entertaining, which is a shocking term to use around a sports team that you support?
Exactly, and not a morbid look through your hands kind of affair, which I think many years were, including with Wenger at the end, where it was like, damn, is this what this is now? So that's cool. Sports are supposed to be fun, David. I believe that is the whole reason we do this thing. Reminder before we get into the show, we are on patreon.com/a football podcast. David, weeks like this, with a lot of news dropping, I think it's where the Discord shines. So you get on the Discord, but there's some other perks as well if you join us on Patreon.
Yeah, you get this show early. So think about this. Charlotte FC hosts Columbus on Wednesday night. Orlando and Miami face off. You would have had an extra 24 hours to get set for that show, those games to get previewed if you had listened to this show earlier. And of course, you get it ad-free as well. But the Discord, this was one of those weekends where it's like, we're getting F1 messages, we're getting MLS Next Pro messages, women's soccer, as well as national teams and everything else going on. So it's a good way to sort of keep your finger on everything. And I think there's been some good debates in there as well.
You could watch in real time as I mocked Columbus Crew too, and everything they stood for as TFCII was doing the impossible only to be crushed. You could see it live if you join us at patreon.com/a football podcast. When we come back, we're getting closer to decision day two Canadian MLS teams still standing, one team waiting to play the string out. We talk about that next on AFP. Welcome back to AFP. Isn't it fitting, DG? Gonzalo Higuain announcing he's stepping away from soccer, but before he goes, following in the footsteps of many other older MLS legend to light up BMO Field. I distinctly recall Zlatan scoring that ridiculous, like behind the back goal. I distinctly had that flashback as Higuain at the death kept Inter Miami alive in the playoff chase and sent TFC's fans home unhappy for another time this season. It just, that's the first thing I thought of.
And you think that Higuain was like, I'm just hanging on to check this box off my career, and then I'm ready to retire?
I played in some big stadiums, but this BMO Field is where I wanted to end it. I do think that, just to go on a tangent though, but I thought his press conference after on midweek, David, about talking about why he's leaving or what the reasoning and his journey, I thought was fascinating. This is someone who so clearly derided by many of the teams that he played for, the fans. I feel like he's a very interesting case. I can't think of many people like him that were that successful while being detested that much.
And you would argue for most people, not argue, but I would assume for most people, his greatest legacy is a big miss, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He's an elite scorer. I actually said it to someone in conversation last year or 2 years ago. I was like, well, he struggled at this club. And then they were like, no, like you look at his numbers, he technically didn't struggle anywhere. Now, part of that is those teams dominate the teams they play against. So even if you're not the starter, you're putting up numbers when you are on the field. But yeah, he's an interesting one. What I remember about Higuain all the way back in the day was when I got into soccer was when he was coming up at River Plate and Fernando Gago was coming up at Boca Juniors. And that was Super Classico was them two. And then they both went to Real Madrid together. And he had this like interesting legacy similar to Forlan because his dad was a famous player and his brother obviously played. And so he was kind of this like anointed one. And it felt like he had never been through adversity. And then, as you mentioned, he's hit it pretty hard now in his professional level. And so I just think it's very cool to see him reflect on it all. It's also cool that this is the way this all ended, right? Where he was derided for half this season and now he's going to go out a hero whether they make the playoffs or not. He's been, resurgent to lead them to this point.
And maybe if you want to look at it this way, I think he wanted to remind people what he really was before he stopped. And it wasn't all highs. Obviously, there were some lows in there. In his early days in MLS, it didn't look like the smartest move. But I think exactly like you said, it was kind of cool to see him be like, yeah, remember me? I was still pretty damn good. And he still might be a force, who knows, in the playoffs.
I also will say, as good as he's been, I think this is the right move for Inter Miami. And I think this is the cleanest way for this has happened, where there's no second guessing, there's no decision, there's no disrespect. Like it's over, it's shut and done, and no one had to make that decision.
Right. The game itself, Paz came back to BMO Field, where I think he still has a lot of fans, and rightfully so. But boy, I wonder what he thinks looking at the team he left and where they both stand at this point of the season. I mean, the game itself, I don't recall many chances at all for TFC, legitimate chances. And that's with most of their guys playing. I think that was a bit of a surprise, at least having their home finale be like that. You expected maybe a bit more, but that's just kind of how the season was. And to only concede one goal, you could argue, was the bigger one based on how the season has went as well. But we'll keep talking about Inter Miami as the weeks, maybe not plural, go on. But TFC Postmortem, David, any positives to take away from this season? It's a large question. I think there are. But if you can look at this in the greater picture.
Yeah. So I would say one, to me, just on that game, I thought it was a letdown that TFC played that way. I didn't think Pozuelo was great until later in the game, and now it's come out that he was injured and he's not going to be playing midweek here. So that's a huge storyline for the MLS playoffs. In terms of for the year for TFC, listen, Bernadeschi's a superstar in MLS, both as a person and as a player. I think that's a positive for sure. I think putting together the roster they put together is positive as well. They just did it too late. So I think going into a full year with Mark Anthony Kaye is going to be great for the team. If they can bring back Jonathan Osorio, I like those two in midfield. If they don't, I do wonder where you play Insigne. I do wonder if there's a space in which you bring him further inside more often. But I think there are positives of like Bob Bradley got his first year, got his fundamentals. I think there are pieces of this team that's coming back, which means you have less to build for next year. And you got some experience for young guys, whether they are going to be, influential or not, I'm not sure. But I think all of that you come away from as silver linings to this season, where I wouldn't be shocked if, next July we're saying, oh, well, Kosi Thompson and DeAndre Kerr have been so big because they got their feet wet last year,
right?
And now they're ready to play. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked by that. But the big question mark with this team will be goalkeeper, the center backs, as well as the central midfield. And that's what they're going to have to fix this offseason.
I wasn't going to say trust the process because I know you should throw tomatoes at me if I did say that earnestly. But to overhaul the squad this much and to basically change everything, got to give Bob another year and see what he can do. I think the other thing is that the holes he has to fill are massive. They're big ones, really big ones in terms of the construction of championship teams and the spine, the formidable spine that you need to contend in MLS that we saw in TFC a few years ago. They're a long ways away from that. So I think that project will be huge, also considering that they're spoken for the most part in terms of their DPs, but they've got one spot probably, right? So yeah, we'll see what they do.
One of the things just to note, because I've talked about it and I think I'm wrong, is my understanding is you cannot give a DP contract to an Alex Collins or an Aaron Long if you are another MLS team. Only their current teams can. So the most you could give them is high TAM, which sort of feels like unless you're going to make a trade, the fixes at those positions are going to come from outside the league, which is always dangerous or risky.
Right. That's very interesting. And okay, put that in your cap. And dumb, extremely dumb. What the hell? Everywhere around the East, you saw some pretty surprising results, including Charlotte beating Philadelphia 4-0. But as they have so often done this season, Montreal took advantage. This game, not a disgrace, but it wasn't good. I don't think by most metrics. But Montreal found a way, and look at that. They're only 2 points behind the Union with one game to play. Wouldn't it be funny if TFC ended up helping Montreal win the East? Wouldn't that just be a final capper on this madcap year for CF Montreal, who have done things in pretty fashion and who have done things in not so pretty fashion, like you have to do sometimes. Just another hardworking performance from Wilf Nancy's team.
Devang, I'm going to put you on the spot right here. If MLS Cup's in Montreal, are you coming?
I think I would go. Actually. I don't know if that would have to be at Olympic Stadium, wouldn't it? Wouldn't they move that?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. There have been other teams who have other stadiums they play in, and they have always hosted MLS Cup since it's become home team host at their stadium. But Montreal just choose to put things at the Big O. It's November 6th. So I think from a weather point of view, it doesn't have to happen. It's more from a capacity point of view, which I don't know what's your bigger advantage.
I think they would trade the outdoor cauldron-esque kind of vibe you get at Stade Saputo for 60,000 people going nuts inside.
But do you think this team wants to play on the Big O more than an opponent? Like, is that a home field advantage for them in terms of the
also fair
surface?
it would be a WWE kind of wrinkle to let Montreal decide the week of, depending on who they played. Right. I wish that was possible.
And then to paint the lines incorrectly. Yeah. You're right. They played that game there.
Exactly. Yeah. And can they be trusted to host a game with the lines painted correctly? That's a good question as well. But that's a fascinating question because you're right. I feel like they do have the ability to not change completely, but adapt to who they're playing. I'm not sure.
And they've shown the ability. I think this game was another sign of their ability to adapt based off who's available to them, which is one of the things that's made this team great this year. It's one of the credits to Wilfried Nonce is, Georgie was MVP. He goes down. Other guys step up. Again, I have said it a zillion times on this show. Matthew Chouanier is the underrated player in MLS. He was awesome again. In this game, they've rotated defenders. He started to get performances out of Zachary Broguillard late on, which feels like, well, they're going to sell Alistair Johnston. And now he's sort of like won him back going into next year because ZBG's probably the starter. Kai Kamara, Romel Kyoto, and now Mason Toy gets I don't think he was credited with it, but he gets the goal in this one as it should have been. And they just have a lot of different ways to beat you. And they have won games this year when they're bad, which is the testament of a great team. And they have had stretches where they've been dominant. So they've done it all. And I think because they are who they are, they're going to be under the radar going to the playoffs. And with NYC turning it back on, I think people are going to talk about Philly and NYC going into the postseason. And they're going to talk about the teams fighting to get in. I think Montreal's going to sort of be on their own on the side. And if I was a fan, I would feel good about this team getting the MLS Cup.
Form-wise, they're the cream of the crop in the Eastern Conference. Really like their momentum heading into the business end of the season. We head now to the West Coast, the improbable Vancouver Whitecaps, now facing a win-in-you're-in situation on decision day. Holy cow. Literally, when we were still doing the heat check, David, ice cold several times along the way. But who are we to write off Andy Sartini? Well, again, literally. This is obviously not a fluke then.
So I think it's fair to be frustrated that it takes this, right? Like, could we not have found their feet? Now, if I was Vanni Sartini, I would say, well, I didn't have Kubas all year. I didn't get Gressel till later. Brian White's been injured and in and out. Martins has just arrived for them. So those parts are fair. And I think I said that in the final heat check thing, whatever Sean finally did. It was like, I get that there are pieces for next year. I think Sartini should be back, but this ability to play with confidence when your back's against the wall is special. And it's something that Vanni Sartini brings to this team that not every coach can do. All three of them have been at home, though. So that's something to watch out for as they head into Minnesota. Is all three games, big games, massive opponents, but they were all at BC Place. So now the question is, can they do it on the road?
It's Minnesota. I mean, a Minnesota team on the road that I know it's not ideal, but you don't mind playing them, David, at this point?
Yeah,
I think the way this is all shaken out, boy, I feel like it's a pick 'em.
It is as good a situation as you can get in this, which is, I think it's a good matchup. Reynoso wants to dominate the ball. They're going to move the fullbacks higher up the field. They're going to have more of the ball. I say them in Minnesota at home. And Vancouver's good at being direct in transition. The other part is Minnesota's just a mess defensively, but especially at center back. So when you look at the Austin game, Brian White pulling the center backs around, his layoffs, his headers down, him creating space for Ryan Gauld and Pedro Vite. It feels like that formula can work again in this one. So I agree with you. I mean, I have confidence that Vancouver can do this. I don't think I don't think it's unreasonable to think they will go there and win, but to control your own destiny at this moment, like, you have to just play attack, front foot. Like, you have to go in with confidence because you didn't think that this would be even possible a few weeks ago.
It's magic. I mean, Ryan Gauld, holy cow, what a performance. And he did this securing every golden Gauld headline you could ever want after this game.
I went with solid gold in the Discord. I'm going to raise my hand and take an L on that.
Galdino. I mean, there's a lot of the Golden God. The Golden God, I know it's a bit tough phonetically, but that also works. What a performance from him. Lucas Cavallini back from the dead.
I asked you this question in the Discord. Have you thought about it more? The question was, for everyone out there who's not in there, if, let's say, Cavallini scores again this weekend, the winner, and they make the playoffs, was his signing a success overall over its time?
Yeah, I think you can look at his impact with the national team as well, and not count it as a check mark in favor, but it is something that if you look at everything as a whole and remove some inconsistent aspects and the head stomping, I think you can look at the cup win and look at Cavallini being a factor in securing a playoff berth as, you know what, it was worth the shot. I don't think it was a resounding success by any means. And I think you look at someone like Ryan Gauld and you're like, yeah, that's the $1 million ticket in terms of what you want to get out of a DP. But it would feel that good, I think, for Cavallini to play a role in getting them in this Cinderella story kind of way, that it would make this from a regrettable signing to it was okay.
I hadn't thought about the national team stuff because he will be the only Vancouver representative at the World Cup on this roster with Max leaving. So I think that is a massive factor, and it has been, to just be involved in that, where how bad would it look if you were one of the 3 MLS teams and you know, there's a chance Montreal starts their entire back line at the World Cup. Jonathan Osorio will be a face. He could start in midfield with Mark Anthony Kaye. So yeah, I think that's a huge factor. Canadian Championship's massive. If they make the playoffs back-to-back years, they won the Canadian title, and he is their lone representative at the World Cup, I think you could make that argument. From a soccer point of view, it will never be, because I think COVID was a real wrench, right? He didn't go to MLS's back. Then they couldn't play at home for a year plus, with him on the team. That stuff you're never going to get back, but I like your argument. And I think if he were to score this weekend or score to win a playoff game, I think there's a chance of making it.
It kind of snuck up on us, but decision day is here. We talked about that matchup, Minnesota, Vancouver obviously being massive. Portland and RSL play, which is a big game there too. Anything else, David? I mean, Miami, Columbus. Miami in a position where they have 2 games. So in the East, it's still...
all of them
some
have
things
2
have
games.
to work out. Wow. Cincinnati? No. Cincinnati does
not.
not.
So Charlotte is in 10th. No, Charlotte is in 9th. Columbus is in 8th. Miami is in 7th. Orlando is in 6th. All 4 of those teams play each other on Wednesday night in rescheduled games. One, because of the Open Cup final. So Orlando will travel to Inter Miami, with basically a win in their in scenario for both teams. Tie, though, and it stays alive. And then on the other side, you have the rescheduled game that will restart in the 16th minute in Charlotte for Columbus against Charlotte. And Charlotte made that competitive for a playoff spot for them now with the massive win over Philly. So that is all obscene. Orlando then hosts Columbus this weekend, which is ridiculous as well. And in the West, all 4 teams play each other, with every team in a win and in scenario. None of them have to rely on other results. The higher teams, if they tie, they could still get in. So I've never seen anything like this before. Like, this is what you're hoping for when you set it up this way, and it never works out.
Oh boy. I mean, I heard you discussing this on MLS Today this week about Charlotte, and the fact that they're here in this scenario, it's already a massive positive, and everything about this team has been a massive positive from this season on. And the fact that literally I would say half the time I tuned into a Charlotte game, it was under a lightning delay, and they still had 45,000 people there.
For sure.
Half the games, man. I was, first of all, climate change, good God, but second of all, incredible. And I also have a friend down there who's gone to a few games as a non-soccer fan and been completely turned. So I feel like the experiment has been a massive success. I know that's anecdotal, but there's a lot of stories like that, David. I'm sure you know better than I do. So for them to be in this situation is amazing. But I wonder, pressure-wise, I look at Oscar and Caleb, and I look at Orlando and Columbus, be like, wow. I guess Orlando, it's a bit different. You have that trophy. But who's under more pressure here?
I think Columbus is under the most pressure of all 4, because I think there's a chance Caleb Porter's gone if they don't make it. I would say Orlando is next, but I would feel comfortable making the argument that if they don't make it, it was still a successful year, winning their first ever trophy. And I think this is a rebuilt roster going towards next year. But I don't think Inter Miami's under any pressure. Like, there was 0 expectations for them, Charlotte as well. So it's hard for me to say that they're under pressure, because I don't think there's a reaction or a shock if they lose.
It's fair. When you plan for decision day, you're hoping that there's going to be drama, but this is going to be, that's quite fun. There's some some less exciting positioning jockeying as well, but there's potential for some matchups to be set that would be utterly fascinating in both conferences. I think my Eastern Conference supremacy take is on the line as well heading into the final weeks. It's everything.
I disagree. I think the East is clearly better than the West. Yeah. Like, there's no way you could tell me Dallas is better than NYCFC right now. And there's no way after what we've seen this weekend that you could tell me the Galaxy or Nashville are better than New York Red Bulls.
You saw what they said about me in the streets of Denver when I had that take, David, and now look at me. Now look.
No, I don't even have time for them, Devang. I won't even listen to what they have to say. But I do have to point out, FC Cincinnati could still fall out of the playoffs, so that they're not decided yet either. And then on top of that, you are looking at seeding and potential. Nashville could still jump FC Dallas for third. The Galaxy could jump them as well for third. So there's home seeding. There's seeding about who you're going to play going on in the West, as well as in the East. Red Bull still trying to jump NYCFC, who just announced that their first round playoff game will be played at Red Bull Arena. So great for the staff at Red Bull Arena either way.
Probably the best. I guess there's a lot of postseason baseball happening in New York too.
Yep. The Citi Field and Yankee Stadium are both closed. Obviously, we prefer Citi Field to be closed on a bye to the DS, but we will, we'll just pitch Jacob deGrom 15 times in 2 days.
Yikes. Go Mets. Okay. Anything else MLS-wise, Dave? I mean, this is going to be fun. Can't wait for this weekend. I think we touched on a lot of things. MLS Cup favorites, Zach threw in some betting lines, which are always interesting to look at. The Union still the favorite. Still, I guess, or we're maybe 275. LAFC, LAFC, your newly crowned Supporters Shield winning LAFC. We almost got out of this segment without congratulating them, but
yeah, it's
interesting where they've been, and to now wrap up the trophy. It's one of the weirder Supporters Shield winners because they were so damn good up until a few weeks ago that we maybe lost that.
It's been 2 different seasons for them. They were averaging like 2.3 goals per game for stretches of the year, and then they were averaging less than 1 goal a game for more recent stretches. So it has been very odd. It's been hard to put in context. It's also been tough because they won it a few years ago, and like it's clear the focus is MLS Cup. So I think the trophy should be celebrated. I think the season should be celebrated, but it's tough to do it when the team basically is saying like, but this is our stated goal and we haven't done that yet. So it kind of puts it in a weird spot, but man, Bouanga's going to be legit. His feet are ridiculous. He's athletic. He's efficient. Or not efficient yet, but he gets himself into dangerous spots, and the goal was special, and I think he's going to continue to be for a while. I think this LAFC team is going to look really different next year. Selling players, losing older players, but I think Bouanga is sort of one they're going to rebuild it around going forward. And I have said that I think they have a better shot at MLS Cup again because I think the West is weaker than the East. I think Philly's a better team playing better soccer, although that's with Alejandro Bedoya, who hasn't been healthy the last few weeks. But LAFC, I mean, if you look at it and say right now at home that they have to face, I don't know, Galaxy, Portland in the second round after a bye, and then Austin or Dallas in the third round, and in the conference finals at home, like I'd rather do that than deal with Inter Miami or Columbus and then NYCFC or Montreal. So that's where I would fall in terms of favorites.
Can't wait. It's going to be just a fantastic day. Sunday, decision day. Cancel your plans. Lie about your plans, perhaps. Alibis. All the excuses you need. Lock it in. We're going to save the MLS Next Pro stuff to the next segment because the kids are our future. And we're going to talk about some Canadians and Americans abroad and some European headlines coming up next on AFP.
Now it's turned over, and here comes Toronto. An opportunity here, trying to catch the keeper off his line! Oh my goodness! TFC2! Temi and Tonaglu! They take the lead! He did it from midfield!
He did it from basically Brampton, Ontario. It was that far out. would have been a story, but TFC2 falling to the Crew in an absolutely wild game in MLS Next Pro. TFC2 on an incredible run this season, making the playoffs for the first time. Really, we talked about feel-good stories, David, for TFC, the club, the big team. TFC2's season, I think, is one of the success stories for the club as a whole. And for them to fall in heartbreaking fashion, probably unfair, but what an incredible ride. What a goal by Tammy. I think that game, under a microscope, we were missing out on what you've been telling us all these years, David. MLS Next Pro is life.
Yeah, for sure. I've been saying that about MLS Next, but MLS Next Pro as well. A lot of these kids are really good. They're fun to watch. I think building up these moments is good for their development in terms of like pressure, and must-win games and nothing else matters. And I think for TFC, the process has been, they had to re-earn trust and connection with the market in terms of independent clubs wanting to send players to them, telling them who their best players were, finding the best players and convincing them that TFC was the right step. I think they've come really far on that, aka when you look at the Canadian national team and how many are from Toronto or GTA and none of them played in the TFC Academy. I think we're past a lot of that. The bridge to the first team is that last step, and that's where you want to see the DeAndre Kerrs, the Kosi Thompsons, the Jaden Nelsons, Shaquille Marshall-Ruddy sign it. If they can play well and get sold, or if they can play well and be pros, that will be the biggest recruiting pitch you can make to the next generation. But to be able to continue to push through talent like this is huge. And on the other side, right? Ryan Telfer, Jason Russell-Rowe, Mo Farsi, they were all on the field for Columbus Crew 2, which shows you, one, the talent in the GTA area, as well as credit to Columbus, because Jason Russell-Rowe and Mo Farsi won the game for them against the Red Bulls the night before, and then they come back on the field against TFC2. It shows you what these two teams can do for senior teams if they are properly used, which I would argue most clubs have not done yet.
Definitely true. The biggest news in North American soccer, and I think United States soccer, especially this week, an investigation commissioned by the U.S. Soccer Federation and conducted by former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates was released on Monday. In that report included allegations against a variety of people, David, new information that we didn't know, but also some information that was uncovered by the fantastic reporting that's been done by several outlets to uncover and expose these truths. I think Sally Yates, someone of her credibility, coming in and saying, hey, this is what's been allowed to happen. This is why this happened. And these are the people who passed the buck and the organizations who passed the buck, was pretty powerful.
100%. And it is, disgusting what you read and what you see. It's also, unfortunately, in line with everything we've learned over the last year. And I think credit to independent journalists who push these stories. Something like this doesn't happen if we didn't already have the stories, I think, about Paul Riley, that Meg Lanahan was able to put together, as well as people at the New York Times, local reporters in these different markets as well. And unfortunately, it just was sort of pulling away more of the sheet to show what was behind it and what a lot of this has been. And it's disgusting to hear what you hear about in Louisville. It's horrifying. And I think the scary part is just the pattern of abuse with Paul Riley, the amount of people that knew, the amount of people that talked about it every time he got a new job. And yet it was never a factor in the continuing hiring and empowering him to be in a place of leadership and control over other people. And so that's depressing. The hope is that there are fixes that come out of this. Sally Yates and her investigative team put some that they would advise in, but they are not the governing body in this situation. NWSL, for the most part, is. NWSL and the NWSL Players Association are working together on a separate investigation that is still yet to come out, that will have more information as well as more advice. But I mean, it was bad. You also look at the amount of people who weren't cooperating because they know that they're hiding things. Woof. And that's a red flag in its own. And I think we could both be real and say there was clearly stated in this investigation an ownership group in Portland, an ownership group in Chicago that should not be allowed to own professional soccer teams or anything, any organization, but we don't have influence and control over that.
the first thing I thought of was Sterling and Sarver.
Yeah.
And what will happen to Robert Sarver. I mean, he's going to get several $1 billion for his punishment, which, I mean, isn't that say it all, but that's exactly it, David. They cannot be allowed to be in these positions, and it'll be up to, I mean, we'll see how much the powerful people are willing to go to bat for this, because it's not right. Moving to Europe, the big news for Canada, Atiba Hutchinson is back in training. This was, I think, one of the biggest questions left unanswered after that window, David. We weren't quite sure where Atiba was at, and a lot of that window was then basing who would be the best player to deploy besides Stefan Ertz if Atiba isn't available, and perhaps that's still a conversation, but Atiba did return to training with Besiktas this week, which is a huge sign. Love Atiba's sister with the caption, "I want you to put out the word that we are back out," with a picture of Atiba. That was huge. That was fantastic. He's working his way back from a bone bruise, which are tricky. I think that's an underrated injury in terms of lingering and just sticking around. But this is a great sign, David.
This is what, I think has been the biggest concern coming into this, stage of World Cup preparation. So if he's healthy, it solves, I think, that biggest question mark. And then it's just, how can the team perform? So, yeah, it's huge to see Tejan back on the field as well. Massive to see.
Huge.
I think those are the two big, injured pieces that you're looking to come back. But Atiba, I think he's in Qatar no matter what, because he'll be a coach. Like, whatever it is, he can do. But he's shown that he still would be a factor for them on the field if he can be healthy.
Stefan Ertz keeps doing the damn thing, and it warms my heart when I see Leamington, Ontario written beside someone producing man of the match honors in a Porto win over Braga.
What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean to me?
I guess Leamington, Ontario would be like, I'm trying to think of like a random upstate
suburb.
New York town, like small.
Oh, upstate.
Yeah, like smaller
Got
than
it.
Utica, like
Okay.
just
Cool.
some random, But basically, you wouldn't put that town as in association with two of Portugal's leading lights in terms of club football. But here we are. He was great again. He's been really good this whole season, David, and now he's getting on the score sheet himself. Back when he made this move, there was some fears. I'll just put my hand up and be like, how much is he going to play? A bit worried about that heading into Qatar. Like, is this the best possible place for him to get ready? Man, obviously it is, because he's just showing out.
Yeah. I didn't know that there was another level for him to go to. And I thought, I can't remember who I was listening to talk about it, but he showed against Valverde and Betancourt last week that he was able to play at their level. And I think to do it every week at the club level probably puts him in the conversation with players like that. Starting at FC Porto, that's one of those clubs. And, they get to the knockout rounds of the Champions League fairly often, probably not this year, but that puts him in a new conversation. And as you said, from his background and, the lack of experience that people have in pushing players through, it's not more than what Alphonso Davies has done. It's just another player doing it in a different way. And I think that's really exciting overall. And if he can hit this peak form, like I go back again and again, last Gold Cup, no Fonzie, no Jonathan David. He was the superstar and he played that way. If he's playing that way and those other guys are playing that way, that's the ceiling for this Canada national team.
Jonathan David, speaking of the Devils, 6th goal of the year, trailing only Neymar and Mbappe in Ligue 1, which pretty good company. JD not happy with his FIFA rating, I'm pretty sure, in the new game. I think I saw a video where he's not pleased at all. And there's some disastrous face scans as well, which always happen. Don't worry, they'll fix it. They'll patch it through. That's some inside info. But
okay.
They'll eventually patch that stuff.
So I shouldn't worry about my face scan?
Don't worry about it. Yeah, your face, exactly. I saw Jack Grealish complaining about his face scan. I'm like, man, just relax. This conversation about who the best player is for Canada, there is none. It's Fonzie. But we talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago. It's still David, 1B, right? Or is Eustache getting closer, I think? Because I feel like the position he plays, there's a Kyle Aaron too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's other guys possibly at the top that you're like, okay, if JD's not banging them in, then they'll find another way to score. But if Stefan Ertz not playing, what the hell do they do? Like, I don't think there's a solution there.
You know that I made that argument that Eustachio to me is 1B. So that's where I stand. And that's not a knock on anyone, but as you said, there's depth at the center forward position. It's also not as influential a position, right? Scoring goals massive, but the flow of the game, the way you play, a lot of that's decided by Eustachio and not by a center forward in any formation. So that's what I think. But I would say again, Jonathan David has the potential to be the best player in the pool in the next 6 years, which probably is not the case about Eustachio.
To the United States, where Christian Pulisic had a game-winning assist to Conor Gallagher to beat Crystal Palace out of the doghouse into the penthouse under Grant Potter for CP, David. I think this is the question. I like Grant Potter as a coach, but there's so many players there and so many people that are trying to leave or should leave or contemplating staying. But what's he thinking? Like, what's his mindset heading into Qatar? Because I guess at this point, do the best with the pretty, not crummy, but it's not a great situation.
It is not great. I think assist is also friendly there. Like Conor Gallagher did a lot of the work on that
assist.
play. Yeah,
it's a hockey assist.
Exactly. And listen, for Pulisic, he can't get anywhere before the World Cup. This is a saying as a USA fan. So at this point, just get the minutes you can, train hard. And then I think post World Cup, there's a decent chance if he plays well that the proper move comes in January. I think there's going to be a ton of moves in January. I've said this a couple times because of the nature of the World Cup and how weird it is. So I just think that's probably got to be your focus and your goal.
Hear a lot about the fate of the young Americans abroad, and rightfully so. It's a very intriguing crop. One name I don't hear that much, and could be because of my cable package or what I subscribe to, but Ricardo Pepi. David, he did have a goal in a loss to AZ Alkmaar. What's the Pepi heat check right now? Because I feel like...
Well, you're lucky that you don't hear about him a lot because it is toxic discourse, to say the least. And it's always, well, he hasn't scored in 11 months. If I didn't... You and me have in common, we've both scored the same amount of goals as Ricardo Pepi professionally in the last 11 months. And it's like constant like that, which is exhausting.
I hate that.
It sounds like he is Greg Berhalter's guy. I thought he lost his spot in the window. Other people feel like he stayed steady, which is actually gaining because Sargent probably lost his spot or lost some standing. And it doesn't seem like there's anyone else in the pool conversation except PFOC. So he's probably on the World Cup plane, but he will make Greg Berhalter's life a lot easier if he continues to score goals. This is now 2 goals and an assist in 3 appearances at Groningen. And I will say this for the rest of my life, whatever happens to Ricardo Pepi's career, the right move for him was to take $20 million deal, which means he got X amount, as a bonus, and he got a Bundesliga contract, and then figure it out. From a soccer point of view, it was correct. It would have been correct to go to the Eredivisie. It would have been correct to go to probably Portugal or a lower down team, something else, to make the jump to Europe. But that money is so life-changing that you take it and you figure it out later. And if it's not for this World Cup, he's still 20. Like, he'll be fine as a player. Unfortunately, there's this tight timeline now where he's trying to turn around for, but this is positive that he's scoring goals for his club team week in and week out.
The World Cup's coming up, so it's positive that we don't have to fill WordPress text plates with just banter and gripes and complaints. We're running out of time, David, for awful takes and people settling scores. So that's good until we can complain about the games. So that's a positive as well.
It's going to be great. I'm stoked about the World Cup. It's also going to be brutal.
Terrible. Before we leave Europe, we must talk about the machine, Erling Haaland. His next target, poor Sir Alex Ferguson, sitting up in the box, watching that just dismantling, David. That seemed a bit cold, a bit unnecessary, but the youth are our future. Haaland skateboarding by him, probably pushing him over, blagging his back as the youth are to do. But this is upsetting almost now what Haaland is doing, setting goal scoring marks every time he plays. The latest, he has 3 Premier League hat-tricks already in 8 appearances. The previous record is Michael Owen, who had 3 in 48 games.
That's wild.
He's running away with the Golden Boot. He's probably going to break the Golden Boot record for goals in the season, obviously. But is this a City thing as well? Or is this... It's obviously a product of Man City just being far and away the best team in the country as well. But Haaland is a beast, and he's being fed balls by a collection of monsters themselves. So it's a recipe for just nuclear results.
Yeah, it's the best team with the best player. Like, there's weirdly been this space with Man City where they've put together every part of the best team except at center forward, and obviously Gabriel Jesus showing how good he is. Like, he's not that far off this, but this is the cream of the crop. This is that top 3 or 4 players in the world, and Haaland's on his way to it.
I have to credit a friend of the show, listener of the show, Andre, for this, big Arsenal fan, but the series of events. So remember when Cristiano Ronaldo was going to go to Manchester City and that was all locked up and Manchester United fans were losing it and Rio Ferdinand was begging Ronaldo, don't do this, don't turn your back on the club, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Manchester United secures that hijacking of the move. They get Ronaldo, they're laughing, blah, 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 etc., etc. City miss out on Harry Kane. They have to wait a bit. They end up getting Haaland, though, and by result, Arsenal gets Gabriel Jesus for a pretty good rate. Quite a cheap rate, if you think about it, in terms of what he should have garnered as a Premier League player. That series of events, David, it warms my damn heart because they wanted Ronaldo back so badly, but it crushed them.
It warms my heart as well.
So good.
It is. Whew. It is great, and it is. Isn't it just an example of, like, I don't think analytics is the right term, but like proper thought and planning process that City and other clubs are using versus Man U, which is just like emotional, right, and whatever you could throw against the board sticks, and everyone's trying to figure it out.
Starting Scott McTominay over Casemiro, again, the biggest game on the calendar. You know you get 2 of them, but what are you doing? What? Come on.
I love the quote that's been going around, which was Sir Alex Ferguson saying, Man City will never go into a Manchester derby as favorites in my lifetime. And it's like, I don't know if we should worry more about that or your health, because if you're really committed to that take, then there's something you got to go for. So, yeah. There's always a silver lining, you know, with everything.
Incredible. Gotta love it. Okay. When we come back to close out AFP, it's the mailbag, #AskAFP. Welcome back to AFP. It's that time again, and I am the fortunate one to be doing the Sean K honors for the mailbag, David. I'll be positing questions from our wonderful Discord community, plus all of you who are asking questions on Twitter, #AskAFP. The first question from Patrick Brizois from the Discord, who asks, where do you want Jonathan David to sign this winter, assuming he will make a move after the World Cup? This is kind of off the back of what I was saying, David, with that striker kind of merry-go-round in Europe, and who ended up where and who looks like they need a striker. I wonder if what we've seen so far has changed where you think the best landing spot for him would be.
I don't think it has, because I think I've been pretty strong on the Dortmund train, which I still, and obviously, unfortunately, with the Haller situation, still think would have been the right fit for him and still could be, even though Modeste is really young. Like, I think they could play together. There's different ways you could set up. It's also Dortmund, so you wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the other pieces get sold and, you know, the formation and lineups change a little bit. And the other one I'm saying is Real Madrid. I'm putting it out there. Like, Benzema's coming towards the end. Be the next generation and, you know, maybe be a super sub and a guy who plays off the wing or underneath a little bit until whenever that is, because, you know, Benzema seems to be ageless. And then be the guy at Real Madrid where no Canadian, no American, outside of Hugo Sanchez, no CONCACAF players ever really established themselves in history.
Yeah, I don't know if, I think what I've now think is that don't come to the Premier League yet, or even like you don't need to come to the Premier League. I think the expectations that'll be placed on him and the price tag that he'll have, I'm not saying Darwin Nunez is going to be a bust. There's obviously a lot of runway left here, but the magnifying glass and the way he's looked at in every minute of every game, I think it's just bad for the player and creates a bad environment. And it'd be better to avoid that and stay out of it.
And also, what's the Premier League team, right?
It's like a West Ham type, not even a West Ham who have too many strikers now, but like exactly that. It's like a Newcastle type maybe. It's like
if you go to a West Ham type club, Leeds, Aston Villa, whoever it is, and they spend that much on you, it changes the pressure as well because you're the only one, right? You have to carry the team. You're the big signing. And I just think that's tough for a guy at his age where these other ones, while you won't be guaranteed playing time, I think you'll be brought in with an opportunity. And I like that idea more now than any of the other Premier League options.
I'm with you. Moving on again from the Discord, Dan H asks, what rebrands have really worked? Dan mentioned the MLS logo as being an example of one of the successful ones, which I fully agree. And I think it's funny that I think I've been on the record lamenting the Adidas designs and like how it was a bit cookie cutter in the sense that they could plug and play colors and make almost the same kit. But the coolest aspect of the logo to me of the league is that you can do this and you can adapt it to whatever the situation is and per club. I think that was some pretty genius design. So I agree with Dan, but I'm curious what you think, David, in terms of rebrands that have worked.
So the two that pop out to me, I'm doing clubs, right? It's not just leagues. That just happened to be one.
Right.
Man City, right? Like their entire look pre being good and rich and after are completely different, but I think it has that like sleek look and now it is their iconic look globally. So that's one. And the other one's Juventus. Even though they went from like a classic look, which I liked and I would have kept, I think the weird J thing works for them and it fits on everything. So it's not like they don't put their name anywhere anymore, right? On the sides of the kits, on the stadium, in the seats, when there's a draw, all those things. It's just that sort of J-like logo and with the black and white. I think it's been a good rebrand for a classic look that personally I would have said didn't need to change, but they did a good job.
I've mentioned Nonces on the show before as my hipster pick to follow this year, but their rebrand, they're also very clean. Their badge, their former badge was really nice though. So I feel like that trade-off it's tough. I think you have to sacrifice to get. I think what Leeds has done recently is pretty cool as well. But that's a great question.
I think a lot of the ones that have worked, it's like you're taking a lot of stuff and you're minimizing it and making it still the same motif and color scheme, but without the we need to have a hat because people are farmers and a boat because people are fishermen. And we also need gold because we used to bring gold from the colonies. And it's like, all right, it's not a full hieroglyphic slab. Let's figure it out. And again, to be clear, I like old school looks, so I don't need that, but I can see how it works in the rebrand process from old school crest to a more modern crest.
Everton rebranded in 2013 and the fans wrote in
it was bad
to have them scrap it, calling it amateurish and embarrassing. That's classic. Finally, S. McGinnis asked, discussing the NWSL scandal, it was mentioned how the Thorns and Timbers were the only MLS ownership group engulfed by the scandal. Do you think Paulson should be forced to sell the team? Well, I think we answered this already, but we can reiterate this.
Yeah. We already said it, and obviously we wouldn't have changed our opinion in the last 25 minutes. But dereliction of duty, incapable of running the team. And I would say this, I'm not 100% sure on any of this, but it does feel like there is a higher ceiling for the club as well. So I think their fans, there's twofold there where it's like, this is disgusting and we should move on from this. But it's not like the club will fall apart without that ownership and leadership group. So, yeah.
Once again, anecdotal, and I don't have statistical data to back this up, but I've seen the majority of the Timbers and Thorns supporters be just as shocked and saddened and disgusted by this as anyone else. But they're in an interesting spot where they have the power. They they have a lot of power based on how impactful they are in league circles and what they mean to the culture of MLS. So that will be interesting to watch as well. Okay. Anything else, David? Anything else we missed? Lots of soccer.
Yeah, lots going on. It's hard to know, but I don't believe so.
Okay. Decision day. Can't wait for this. Eastern Conference, couple spots up for grabs. I was about to say plenty, but not. And then in the West, Vancouver playing for their playoff lives in Minnesota. Be sure to watch that game. It's going to be a really fun day. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/a football podcast. A good place to enjoy Decision Day would be our Discord, where we're chatting footy all the time, but I think Sunday will be especially fun as there's a zillion games going on at once. So join us to get access there. You also get the show ad-free, and you get it early on Tuesdays when we record. Follow us on Twitter @afootballpod. Get show releases, show news and notes, plus random retweets from whoever's on manning the account at any given time. You should try to guess who it is, if it's Sean or I, or Zach, or someone else. It's a fun game. Plus a rating or review wherever you get this. But David, I don't know if you have access, to be honest.
I don't think I do. But I was going to say, you asked if there was anything else, and 15 seconds ago, it came out that Victor Wanyama announced he will not be back with CF Montreal next year. So this is the final for him, which makes it even a bigger sort of must-win scenario this year.
No pressure, fam. Huge news to end the show in classic AFP fashion, but we're now getting the news on the show.
Exactly.
The timings
we nailed
are now working out. The news is being covered. Victor Wanyama playing for the chip and the dip with CF Montreal. Follow us on AFP to see if he does it. All right, for producer Greg and for Zach and David, thank you so much for listening to AFP. We'll talk to you next week.